You may not realize it, but the first voice you ever learned to interpret wasn't yours. Long before you learned how to speak, long before you even had the language to describe fear or comfort or love, your nervous system was already listening, watching, absorbing every expression, every silence, every shift in energy in the home around you. And for many people, the loudest emotional imprint came from one figure, your father. Not always through what he said, but through what he didn't. Through what he tried to hide, through what he thought he had to be. You learned to read him before you even understood yourself. You could feel when he was distant. You could feel when he was disappointed. You could sense the tension in the room before he walked in. And you didn't know it then, but your mind was recording those moments as instructions. Instructions on what love means. Instructions on when you're allowed to speak. Instructions on when you should stay quiet. Instructions on how safe it is to be yourself. A child doesn't see a father as a flawed human being. A child sees him as the world. So every expression he made, whether he intended it or not, became a lesson about who you needed to be in order to feel valued, accepted, or safe. If your father raised his voice, you learned to shrink your own. If he was absent, you learned to carry that emptiness like it was your fault. If he pushed you toward perfection, you learned that love has conditions. If he hid his emotions, you learned that strength means silence. If he withdrew into himself, you learned that your needs are too loud. You didn't choose those lessons, you inherited them. And the thing about emotional inheritance is that it doesn't come with instructions. It comes with patterns. Patterns that follow you into adulthood without you ever questioning where they came from. Patterns that whisper to you during moments of fear, or stress, or doubt, sounding exactly like your own voice, even though they were never yours to begin with. That voice inside you, the one that says, don't bother anyone, don't fail, don't show how you feel, don't expect too much, don't shine too brightly, didn't appear out of nowhere. It was shaped by years of watching someone who was also trying to survive their own upbringing. Someone who didn't always know how to love the way they wanted to. Someone who wasn't taught emotional safety, or emotional language, or emotional presence. Someone who learned to carry their burdens in silence and assumed you could do the same. You weren't born doubting yourself. You weren't born overthinking. You weren't born walking on emotional eggshells. You learned those behaviors because at some point they helped you navigate the world you grew up in. They helped you avoid conflict. They helped you stay unnoticed when being noticed felt dangerous. They helped you manage the unpredictable. They helped you survive the emotional storm around you, even if the storm was quiet and invisible from the outside. We often grow up thinking our emotional struggles are proof that something is wrong with us. But the truth is far gentler. Your struggles are proof that you adapted, that your mind did everything it could to keep you safe at a time when safety didn't come from clarity or comfort, but from predictability. And so your brain learned to anticipate danger, to scan for tone shifts, to analyze facial expressions, to assume the worst, not because you were negative, but because your survival depended on preparation. This is why so many adults today confuse vigilance with personality. You think you're indecisive, when in reality you learned to freeze to avoid making the wrong move as a child. You think you're too sensitive, when in reality you grew up needing to detect emotional changes before they happened. You think you're difficult to love, when in reality, you never received love in a language you could understand. You think you avoid conflict because you're peaceful, but you do it because conflict once felt like danger. You think you need to be perfect because deep down, perfection once felt like the only path to acceptance. Every fear you carry has a history. Every insecurity has a beginning. Every emotional habit has a reason. And yet, here's the quiet miracle hidden inside all of this. None of these emotional patterns are permanent. They may feel like part of your identity because you've carried them for so long, but they are not you. They are echoes of a childhood shaped by someone who was also trying to survive their own upbringing. Someone who didn't always know how to love the way they wanted to. Someone who wasn't taught emotional safety, or emotional language, or emotional presence. Someone who learned to carry their burdens in silence and assumed you could do the same. You weren't born doubting yourself. You weren't born overthinking. You weren't born walking on emotional eggshells. You learn those behaviors because at some point they helped you navigate the world you grew up in. They helped you avoid conflict. They helped you stay unnoticed when being noticed felt dangerous. They helped you manage the unpredictable. They helped you survive the emotional storm around you, even if the storm was quiet and invisible from the outside. We often grow up thinking our emotional struggles are proof that something is wrong with us. But the truth is far gentler. Your struggles are proof that you adapted, that your mind did everything it could to keep you safe at a time when safety didn't come from clarity or comfort, but from predictability. And so your brain learned to anticipate danger, to scan for tone shifts, to analyze facial expressions, to assume the worst, not because you were negative, but because your survival depended on preparation. This is why so many adults today confuse vigilance with personality. You think you're indecisive, when in reality you learned to freeze to avoid making the wrong move as a child. You think you're too sensitive, when in reality you grew up needing to detect emotional changes before they happened. You think you're difficult to love, when in reality you never received love in a language you could understand. You think you avoid conflict because you're peaceful, but you do it because conflict once felt like danger. You think you need to be perfect because deep down, perfection once felt like the only path to acceptance. Every fear you carry has a history. Every insecurity has a beginning. Every emotional habit has a reason. And yet, here's the quiet miracle hidden inside all of this. None of these emotional patterns are permanent. They may feel like part of your identity because you've carried them for so long, but they are not you. They are echoes of a childhood shaped by someone who was also trying to survive their own upbringing. Someone who didn't always know how to love the way they wanted to. Someone who wasn't taught emotional safety or emotional language or emotional presence. Someone who learned to carry their burdens in silence and assumed you could do the same. You weren't born doubting yourself. You weren't born overthinking. You weren't born walking on emotional eggshells. You learned those behaviors because at some point they helped you navigate the world you grew up in. They helped you avoid conflict. They helped you stay unnoticed when being noticed felt dangerous. They helped you manage the unpredictable. They helped you survive the emotional storm around you, even if the storm was quiet and invisible from the outside. We often grow up thinking our emotional struggles are proof that something is wrong with us. But the truth is far gentler. Your struggles are proof that you adapted, that your mind did everything it could to keep you safe at a time when safety didn't come from clarity or comfort, but from predictability. And so your brain learned to anticipate danger, to scan for tone shifts, to analyze facial expressions, to assume the worst, not because you were negative, but because your survival depended on preparation. This is why so many adults today confuse vigilance with personality. You think you're indecisive, when in reality, you learned to freeze to avoid making the wrong move as a child. You think you're too sensitive, when in reality, you grew up needing to detect emotional changes before they happened. You think you're difficult to love, when in reality, you never received love in a language you could understand. You think you avoid conflict because you're peaceful, but you do it because conflict once felt like danger. You think you need to be perfect because deep down, perfection once felt like the only path to acceptance. Every fear you carry has a history. Every insecurity has a beginning. Every emotional habit has a reason. And yet, here's the quiet miracle hidden inside all of this. None of these emotional patterns are permanent. They may feel like part of your identity because you've carried them for so long, but they are not you. They are echoes of a childhood shaped by someone who was also trying to survive their own upbringing. Someone who didn't always know how to love the way they wanted to. Someone who wasn't taught emotional safety or emotional language or emotional presence. Someone who learned to carry their burdens in silence and assumed you could do the same. You weren't born doubting yourself. You weren't born overthinking. You weren't born walking on emotional eggshells. You learned those behaviors because at some point they helped you navigate the world you grew up in. They helped you avoid conflict. They helped you stay unnoticed when being noticed felt dangerous. They helped you manage the unpredictable. They helped you survive the emotional storm around you, even if the storm was quiet and invisible from the outside. We often grow up thinking our emotional struggles are proof that something is wrong with us. But the truth is far gentler. Your struggles are proof that you adapted, That your mind did everything it could to keep you safe at a time when safety didn't come from clarity or comfort, but from predictability. And so your brain learned to anticipate danger, to scan for tone shifts, to analyze facial expressions, to assume the worst, not because you were negative, but because your survival depended on preparation. This is why so many adults today confuse vigilance with personality. You think you're indecisive, when in reality, you learned to freeze to avoid making the wrong move as a child. You think you're too sensitive, when in reality, you grew up needing to detect emotional changes before they happened. You think you're difficult to love, when in reality, you never received love in a language you could understand. You think you avoid conflict because you're peaceful, but you do it because conflict once felt like danger. You think you need to be perfect because deep down, perfection once felt like the only path to acceptance. Every fear you carry?
There's a moment in every adult's life when the world suddenly feels quieter than usual. It doesn't happen at a dramatic time. It doesn't announce itself. It appears in the middle of an ordinary day, while sitting alone in your room, or staring at your phone, or walking outside, and you suddenly feel something shift. A question rises inside you that you've avoided your whole life. Why do I feel this way? It's a simple question, but it can unravel years of beliefs, habits, and emotional armor. Because in that moment, you're not just asking about your current feelings, you're asking about your emotional blueprint, the one you inherited long before you understood its shape. For many people, that blueprint leans heavily towards self-protection. You learn to read the world like a threat map. You learn to expect disappointment before joy. You learn to prepare for conflict even when none existed. You learn to quiet your needs, because expressing them once led to discomfort. You learn to work twice as hard for half the acknowledgement. And the worst part is that these patterns masqueraded as your personality. You didn't realize you were living inside emotional instructions someone else wrote. And when your father was the one who shaped the early emotional environment, his presence or absence carved rules into your nervous system without either of you realizing it. If he was emotionally distant, you learned not to rely on anyone. If he was unpredictable, you learned to stay alert. If he was hard to impress, you learned to overperform. If he was critical, you learned to evaluate yourself before anyone else could. If he was quietly suffering, you learned to take up less space. These rules didn't make you weak, they made you adaptive. You were a child trying to navigate a world you didn't choose, responding to emotional climates you didn't understand. And your brain, brilliant, protective, loyal, found ways to keep you safe. Safety didn't always mean happiness. It meant predictability. It meant controlling what you could control. It meant lowering your expectations so you wouldn't feel hurt. It meant holding your breath emotionally for years without even noticing. When you finally reach adulthood, these old patterns become heavy. You feel exhausted without knowing why. You become the person who comforts everyone else but has no idea how to soothe yourself. You become the one people admire for being strong, even though that strength is made of unspoken exhaustion. You become the dependable one, the calm one, the quiet one. Not because you want to be, but because your childhood required it. This is where confusion often begins. You know you want something different, a deeper sense of peace, connection, safety, but your body still responds to life using rules from decades ago. You may want intimacy, but flinch when someone gets close. You may crave affection, but panic when you receive it. You may desire rest, but feel guilty the moment you stop working. You may want to express your emotions, but feel frozen the moment they rise. You may want to make bold decisions, but constantly hear the internal echo of, "Don't mess this up." It's not that you don't know what you want. It's that your nervous system is still serving a childhood version of you. A version that learned danger quickly and safety slowly. A version that learned silence faster than the language of needs. A version that believed love must be earned, not received. This emotional conflict, wanting to grow but feeling stuck, doesn't mean you failed. It means you're waking up. You're becoming aware of the invisible instructions that shaped you. And awareness is a doorway. Once it opens, you can't go back to pretending the old rules make sense. You start noticing every moment you shrink yourself, every moment you apologize for existing, every moment you try to predict someone else's emotions, every moment you hold your breath before expressing your truth, every moment you think you're being reasonable, but you're actually being afraid. And this awareness slowly leads to compassion, not just for yourself, but for your father. It becomes clear that he wasn't living freely either. He was carrying rules of his own, passed down by his father and his father's father. Unspoken emotional instructions inherited through generations. Maybe he was taught that vulnerability is weakness. Maybe he was taught that real men don't cry. Maybe he was punished for showing emotion, so he never learned how to show it to you. Maybe he felt pressured to provide, to be strong, to perform, to endure, and in that pressure, he forgot how to connect. Maybe his silence wasn't rejection, it was fear. Fear of not being enough. Fear of not knowing how to love in a way you needed. Fear of failing, even when he tried. When you begin to see him as human, suddenly the narrative shifts. The criticism loosens. The blame softens. You begin to understand that his emotional absence wasn't about you. His distance wasn't proof you were unworthy. His expectations weren't evidence that you needed to be perfect. His silence didn't mean he didn't care. He might have loved you deeply, but through a language he wasn't fluent in. You were learning from a man who never received the emotional education he needed to teach you. And that realization creates a strange mixture of grief and freedom. Grief for the childhood you didn't have. Freedom because you realize you don't have to keep living under the same emotional limitations. You are allowed to write your own emotional rules. You are allowed to question the voice inside you that says you must be strong all the time. You are allowed to challenge the habits that once kept you safe but now keep you stuck. You are allowed to want tenderness. You are allowed to express vulnerability. You are allowed to grow beyond the emotional vocabulary you were given. Growth doesn't happen in loud, dramatic ways. It happens in tiny decisions that seem insignificant in the moment. When you choose to express a feeling instead of burying it. When you allow yourself to rest without earning it. When you say no for the first time without apologizing. When you let yourself cry instead of holding back. When you admit you're struggling instead of pretending everything is fine. When you stop chasing perfection and start embracing honesty. These small steps may feel uncomfortable, even dangerous at first. Your nervous system may interpret them as violations of the old rules. That's why healing feels like betrayal. You're not betraying your father. You're betraying the emotional version of him that lived in your mind. You're stepping out of the psychological shadow he cast, not because he intended to control you, but because you internalized his fears as your own. And this is where bravery quietly begins. Not the kind of bravery that others applaud, but the kind that no one sees. The bravery of sitting with your emotions instead of numbing them. The bravery of telling the truth even when your voice shakes. The bravery of allowing yourself to be seen for who you are, not who you think you must be. The bravery of loving yourself in ways you were never taught. At first, this new inner voice will feel unfamiliar. It will whisper things like, "You deserve rest. You are allowed to feel. You matter. You're doing your best." You don't have to carry everything alone. And your mind may resist these messages. They will feel too gentle, too forgiving, too unfamiliar. But with time, repetition, and compassion, your nervous system will begin to trust them. And slowly, the old survival rules will lose their power. You don't need to erase your father to evolve. You simply need to stop shrinking your identity to fit inside the emotional blueprint he unintentionally handed you. The blueprint was incomplete. You are finishing it. Healing is not a fight against your past. It is a continuation of your lineage in a healthier direction. When you treat yourself with kindness, you're healing generations of silent suffering. When you allow yourself to feel, you're breaking cycles of emotional suppression. When you choose connection over avoidance, you're rewriting inherited narratives. When you give yourself permission to grow, you're expanding the emotional possibilities for every generation after you. You are not weak for wanting to understand yourself. You are not fragile for feeling deeply. You are not difficult for needing support. You are not dramatic for acknowledging your wounds. You are human, and everything you feel is valid, understandable, and treatable with compassion.
There is a quiet truth that most people never say out loud. Growing up does not automatically erase the emotional rules we learned as children. Even when we become adults, capable, strong, responsible, the child inside us continues to live, shaping our reactions, our fears, our choices, and our relationships. That child still tries to make sense of the world using memories instead of reality. And so much of what we call adult behavior is really just old emotional survival instinct wearing adult clothes. You might notice it in the way you hesitate before asking for help, or the way you rehearse your words before expressing a simple need, or how you overthink small decisions as if a wrong choice will lead to disaster. You may find yourself apologizing automatically, even when you did nothing wrong. You may hold your breath around conflict. You may feel uncomfortable with praise because you learned not to expect it. You may feel nervous when someone is too kind or too distant. You may feel the need to stay strong because being vulnerable once led to embarrassment or misunderstanding. These habits didn't appear randomly. They were shaped by the emotional climate of your childhood, especially through the way your father interacted with the world. He may not have taught you lessons intentionally. Most of the emotional blueprint is passed down through observation, not instruction. If your father rarely talked about his feelings, you learned that emotions are private, dangerous, or unnecessary. If he seemed disappointed in life, you learned to lower your expectations. If he lost his temper easily, you learned to avoid conflict at any cost. If he demanded perfection, you learned to fear mistakes. If he shut down during stress, you learned to numb yourself. If he ignored his own needs, you learned that needs are burdens. If he walked away instead of communicating, you learned that silence is safer than honesty. The patterns were carved into you by repetition, not intention. And because they became so familiar, you unconsciously began calling them my personality. But what if some of the traits you think define you are actually invisible echoes of your father's struggles? What if the fear of disappointing others isn't your real fear, it's his? What if your habit of always staying strong wasn't your choice, it was the environment you had to adapt to? What if your belief that you must earn love is just a reflection of how hard he believed he had to work to deserve respect, safety, or worth? The hardest part of emotional growth is realizing how much of yourself was never truly yours. You inherited habits, beliefs, fears, and emotional rules that were written long before you were born. Your father carried them from his father, who carried them from his father, stretching back through generations of unspoken pain. And somewhere along the line, someone has to say,
this ends with me. Not out of anger, but out of awareness. Not out of rebellion, but out of understanding. Because once you realize that emotional patterns are generational, not personal, you stop blaming yourself. You stop blaming him. You start understanding that both of you were shaped by forces neither of you chose. This understanding creates a strange type of compassion, the compassion of seeing someone clearly for the first time. You begin to understand why he may have struggled to show affection, why he avoided difficult conversations, why he couldn't handle emotional closeness, why he responded with anger instead of vulnerability, why he seemed distant even when he was physically present. You begin to see the scared, unhealed child inside him, the one who never had guidance, emotional safety, or permission to feel. This doesn't excuse everything, but it explains more than you expected. And explanations soften the heart. They make it possible to let go of resentment, not because everything was okay, but because you finally understand why things were the way they were. When you see your father as human, something shifts inside you. It becomes easier to take ownership of your life, to separate your identity from his emotional limitations. You start recognizing the moments when your old wiring tries to take control. You catch yourself thinking, I shouldn't express this feeling. And then you pause. Is that really my rule or his? You feel the urge to stay silent during discomfort, and you ask, am I protecting myself now, or am I responding to memories? You feel panic when someone is upset, and you wonder, is this current danger or old fear? You avoid asking for help, and you question, am I afraid of being a burden because I learned that, or because it's true? These moments of awareness don't fix everything instantly, but they shift you from autopilot into conscious living. This is where emotional maturity begins. Not when you stop feeling fear, but when you stop letting inherited fears define your truth. As you continue this journey, the changes remain small, but transformation is made of small things. You begin choosing honesty over silence. You begin choosing rest over constant productivity. You begin choosing compassion over self-criticism. You begin choosing boundaries over people-pleasing. You begin letting yourself feel sadness without judging it. You begin celebrating progress instead of demanding perfection. You begin taking up space instead of shrinking into the background. These new behaviors feel strange at first. You may even feel guilty, because your nervous system believes the old rules kept you safe. It will whisper warnings, don't say too much, don't trust too easily, don't show weakness, don't upset anyone, don't relax, don't disappoint. But when you breathe through those warnings, when you reassure your inner child that the world is different now, the fear gradually loses its intensity. Over time, your internal voice becomes kinder. You start hearing things no one said to you in childhood, words that feel foreign but healing. I'm proud of you. You're doing enough. You don't have to earn rest. It's okay to feel what you feel. You're safe now. You're not alone. You deserve peace. You're already worthy. These are the words you always needed from your father, but you're giving them to yourself. And that is the moment your emotional lineage begins to evolve. You're not replacing him, you're completing what he couldn't. You're becoming the emotional upgrade your family line desperately needed. The one who breaks the silent rules, the one who nurtures instead of suppressing, the one who feels instead of freezing, the one who speaks instead of shrinking, the one who loves with openness instead of fear, the one who heals instead of passing pain forward. This kind of change doesn't shout. It doesn't arrive with grand gestures. It arrives quietly, in moments where you choose the new path. When you sit with discomfort instead of avoiding it. When you admit your needs instead of burying them. When you forgive yourself instead of punishing yourself. When you extend compassion instead of judgment. When you let yourself rest without guilt.
when you allow yourself to be loved without pushing it away. No one may notice these small acts, but your inner world notices, your nervous system notices, your future self notices. And one day, if you choose to become a parent, or even if you simply influence others, you'll realize that the emotional freedom you're cultivating doesn't end with you. It spreads, it multiplies, it creates a new emotional environment that feels safe, open, and alive. You become the father you needed, even if you never become one in the literal sense. You become the voice of gentleness your childhood never heard. You become the safe space you always longed for. You become the living proof that emotional evolution is possible. You are not the continuation of your father's limitations. You are the continuation of his hopes, the hopes he never learned how to express. You are the answer to the unspoken dreams hidden behind his silence. You are the one who turns inherited pain into inherited wisdom. This is what breaking the cycle truly means, not abandoning the past, but transforming it. You are not weak for wanting to heal. You are brave for trying. And every step you take toward emotional truth is a step toward becoming the most authentic version of yourself, a version shaped not by fear, but by possibility.
And yet, as I walked deeper into the maze of choices, temptations, illusions, and expectations, something inside me shifted. I realized that life had never been about controlling everything, but about understanding the forces shaping me, inside and outside. It was as if someone had gently removed the blindfold I didn't even know I'd been wearing. Suddenly, I could see the patterns I'd always missed, how certain habits held me hostage, how certain people secretly shaped my decisions, how certain memories still owned me because I never confronted them. And even more surprising was this. Every time I blamed the world for my struggles, I was actually giving my power away, piece by piece, without even noticing it. So I stopped. I sat with myself. I asked harder questions. Why do I chase things that don't matter? Why do I punish myself for mistakes I made years ago? Why do I allow the noise of others to drown out my own voice? And why do I rush through life as if there's a finish line waiting for me? No one told me that real transformation doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like grief. It feels like saying goodbye to versions of yourself that kept you alive, even if they were hurting you. It feels like letting go of dreams you outgrew. It feels like stepping into uncertainty with only a tiny spark of hope. But that spark is everything. That spark is the beginning of self-trust. I learned the hard way that the universe never takes anything from you without offering something in return. The trade just isn't obvious at first. You lose people who never saw your worth, so you can meet people who will. You lose comfort, so you can gain strength. You lose illusions, so you can finally see truth. You lose the old identity you clung to, so you can grow into someone you were always meant to become. And yes, you even lose the old wounds, not by forgetting them, but by no longer letting them control you. Pain doesn't disappear when you heal. It just becomes part of your wisdom. Over time, I began noticing something beautiful. The deeper I understood my inner world, the clearer the outer world became. I saw how many people were carrying battles they never spoke about. I saw how many were pretending to be fine because that's what society demanded. I saw how many were lost, not because they lacked direction, but because they never learned how to listen to themselves. We've mastered multitasking, but we've forgotten how to feel. We've mastered communication, but we've forgotten how to connect. We've mastered performance, but we've forgotten authenticity. And when you start seeing that, you stop judging others. You start understanding them. You start seeing the human behind the mask. One day someone asked me, "What changed you the most?" I didn't talk about success or failure. I didn't talk about money or milestones. I said, I finally got tired of betraying myself. Because that's what most of us are doing without realizing it. We ignore our intuition. We silence our emotions. We tolerate disrespect. We shrink ourselves to be accepted. We distract ourselves to avoid the truth, and somewhere along the way, we lose who we are. But there comes a moment, a quiet moment, when you can no longer run. That moment is terrifying, but it's also the doorway to everything you've ever wanted. The truth is, growth doesn't require permission. It requires courage. Courage to admit you were wrong. Courage to confront your patterns. Courage to walk away from what doesn't serve you. Courage to choose peace over people-pleasing. Courage to rebuild your life from the inside out. And above all, courage to believe you deserve more, even when you don't feel like you do. That belief alone can change everything, because what you believe shapes what you chase, and what you chase shapes what you become. As I kept evolving, something unexpected happened. Life didn't get easier, but I got stronger. Problems didn't vanish, but I learned to face them differently. Instead of reacting from fear, I responded with clarity. Instead of letting emotions control me, I listened to their messages. Instead of drowning in expectations, I stepped into intention. Instead of trying to control outcomes, I focused on controlling my effort. And the more I aligned my inner world, the more my outer world responded. Then came the biggest realization of all. Healing is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It's about reconnecting with your curiosity, your imagination, your playfulness, your bravery, your dreams. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that life pushed into the shadows. And once you start reclaiming them, everything changes. Your choices change, your standards change, your relationships change, your energy changes. You stop chasing validation because you finally see your own worth. You stop overthinking every step because you trust your own path. You stop fearing loss because you understand that what's meant for you cannot be taken from you. Through all of this, one insight echoed again and again. You don't need to fix your whole life. You just need to fix your next step. One honest conversation, one boundary, one decision, one moment of courage, one act of self-respect. Change doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small, quiet shifts, and those shifts build momentum. That momentum becomes a pattern. That pattern becomes identity, and identity shapes destiny. Life will test you. Life will break you open. Life will push you to your limits. But life is not trying to destroy you, it's trying to wake you up. Every heartbreak is a lesson. Every failure is a redirection. Every delay is protection. Every ending is rebirth. And every struggle you've ever survived has shaped you into someone capable of more than you know. You may not see it right now, but the version of you that exists on the other side of this chapter is stronger, wiser, more grounded, more compassionate, and more aligned than you've ever been. Sometimes you don't grow because you're inspired, you grow because life forces you to level up. You grow because staying the same becomes more painful than changing. You grow because the person you used to be no longer fits the life you're meant to live. So if you feel frustrated, lost, confused, or stuck, remind yourself, this is not the end of your story. This is the part where everything shifts. And so I began to trust the timing of my life. I began to trust that what I lost created space for what I needed. I began to trust that the pain that broke me was shaping me. I began to trust that the things falling apart were actually falling into place. And the more I trusted, the lighter I felt. The more I surrendered, the more things aligned. The more I let go, the more I received. Looking back now, I understand something I didn't have the wisdom to see then. I wasn't being punished. I was being prepared. Prepared for better relationships. Prepared for deeper self-awareness. Prepared for opportunities I couldn't have handled before. Prepared for a version of myself who could walk through storms without losing their center. Life wasn't destroying me, it was sculpting me. And every painful moment was a chisel shaping me into someone stronger. There were nights I questioned everything. Nights when I felt alone. Nights when I didn't trust myself. Nights when I wished I could go back to who I used to be.
But those nights were the teachers I needed. They taught me resilience. They taught me patience. They taught me surrender. They taught me that clarity often comes after chaos, and peace often comes after storms. And eventually, slowly, I found myself changing. I spoke kindly to myself. I took responsibility for my life. I let go of guilt that wasn't mine to carry. I stood up for myself even when my voice shook. I forgave myself for not knowing better. And most importantly, I stopped running from the truth. When you begin to walk this path of self-awareness, healing, courage, and alignment, something incredible happens. The world doesn't just look different. You feel different. You walk different. You speak different. You choose differently. You stop letting fear steer your life. You stop letting doubt control your decisions. You stop letting the past dictate your future. You rise, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a steady, unshakable way. This rise is quiet but powerful. It shows in your boundaries. It shows in your energy. It shows in the people you allow into your life. It shows in the way you protect your peace. It shows in the way you refuse to settle. It shows in the way you honor your worth. And the more you rise, the more life meets you at that level. And maybe the most beautiful part of this entire journey is the realization that you were never broken. You were simply becoming. You were shedding old versions of yourself. You were outgrowing environments that no longer matched your soul. You were learning lessons meant to guide you to your next chapter. You were becoming someone who could hold more love, more clarity, more purpose, more truth. Healing wasn't about fixing you, it was about freeing you. So if you're listening to this now, wherever you are in your journey, remember this: you are not behind, you are not lost, you are not failing, you are evolving, you are learning, you are healing, you are becoming someone your past self would be proud of. Don't rush this chapter. Don't compare your timing to others. Don't underestimate the quiet work you're doing. Every step matters. Every moment counts. Every breath is progress.